had to do with knowing and not believing that I had a knowledge of it because of an experience. But I didn't really know that for sure until I was an adult. After about 150, 200 sighting reports had come through the door here, I decided to give myself the benefit of the doubt and to believe my own memory of having seen a Bigfoot. So it wasn't putting off any heavy vibes, it was just kind of looking at me kind of curiously. And I had eye contact with it. So I do think that that's what was the impetus for me putting together this museum. The Bigfoot I saw wasn't threatening in any way, despite its size. And it was big. It's the biggest human being I've ever seen.
Would you say, what were the emotions you felt as a young kid? Was it fright, or
no?
You're saying it didn't?
No, it was
scary?
more like awe. Just absolute awe, like, wow, ooh, look at that thing. In this part of the country, in 1950, which is when I think it happened, I'm pretty sure it was in 1950, the word Yeti wasn't being spoken. Bigfoot hadn't entered the scene. There was just nothing to attach it to. So I had this sighting, and my parents didn't see it, but they were there right after I saw it, and they told me to forget about it and don't worry about it, and it was probably a tramp. And so I just kind of shoved it aside at that point and went about my life. But the next year, they photographed footprints on Mount Everest, and they called that the Abominable Snowman. And that's when there was all the news coming out. It was all over the front pages with the pictures of the footprints. And I went to my mom and had her get me a scrapbook, and I started cutting out articles. So we were poor as church mice. And I was finishing up high school. I was valedictorian, co-valedictorian of the high school. And I applied to a lot of schools. And I got accepted at Stanford, a 4-year scholarship. Of course, you got to come up with a major in this, and so I was having trouble with a major. I was first thinking about doing a major in scientific illustration, is what I was interested in. So I was thinking of doing a biology major and connecting it with that, because I'd always enjoyed that. It was the best thing about my science classes were the drawings I got to do, and I love drawing animals and detailed illustrations and stuff. I was really good at that. And so I thought, well, maybe I'd go up that way, go that route. But then I thought, well, on the other hand, I kind of like painting and drawing too. Maybe I'll just be an artist. So I better just do an art major. So I declared an art major because that was really a no-brainer for me. And taking and passing and doing well in those classes was easy. So I thought, well, I can do more than this art major. I could certainly take a bigger load than this. So I made a list of the classes that I would take that would help me in my study of Bigfoot. I took the list to the registrar of the university, and I said, here's a list of classes. If I took these classes, would that give me any kind of a degree? Would there be any extra value besides the knowledge? And I said, yeah, you would have then a degree in physical anthropology. Ever since I was a very small child, I've had an obsession with apes and monkeys. Like some kids are into dinosaurs and some kids are into zombies these days and stuff. I was into apes and monkeys. I wanted to go to the zoo and hang out with the apes, watch the apes.
In 1969, my brother and I formed Capritaurus. He approached me. He had just gotten out of Stanford, and my mother suggested to him that we pool our resources. I was already doing antique restoration here, so he approached me and I agreed. We called it Capritaurus Handcrafts, Fine and Applied Arts. And then after my brother and I were partners, we were making these thumb pianos, and the Renaissance Fair. We learned about the Renaissance Fair. We had no idea about the Renaissance Fair. And so one of these guys in the back, named Rick, took some of the thumb pianos to the Renaissance Fair, and he sold a whole bunch of them. He and I had made a bunch of them by hand, and I thought, wow, this could be a good thing. So that was the first musical instrument. And then after that, we got into making the dulcimers, and we made a smaller, more traditional sized dulcimer. And my brother Michael, he went to the fair. His job was to sell, mine was to make. And he came back from the fair, and they weren't selling very well. And he had the idea of making the dulcimer a little bit larger. And so that's what we did. I made a larger dulcimer. He and I collaborated and designed this larger dulcimer. And they started selling like crazy. We got the idea of putting guitar tuners on them. And when we first put them on there, they looked kind of funny sticking up there. And after that, then they really started to sell because the people could actually tune the dulcimers real easy.
We got to we became members of the local folk scene because I had a couple of guys that worked in the shop here. We got together and formed a little group, a trio called Hubert's Hot Shots, and we performed at coffee houses and places around Santa Cruz County. And we did eclectic music, a mixture of traditional Irish, Scottish, British Isles music combined with American fiddle tunes and old-time band music, occasional little bluegrass, a little this and that. We played at the Good Fruit Company. David Tierman ran that. Played up at Buffalo Girls and Ben Lomond back when that was operating. Anyway, there were lots of venues in Santa Cruz where you could play music, and you could do it for pass the hat and a free drink, or a meal or something like that. So we had a pretty successful little band. And so I got to meet other people in the folk community, music community. Also, the store, which started out as a showcase for our dulcimers, over time started growing and growing and growing until it became a music store. And so we had instruments in here that we didn't make, that we sold like any other music store. And it was a folk music center, and we tried to specialize in instruments you didn't find in the downtown stores. Harps, zithers, and other esoteric instruments and things that are hard to find. When we do a Renaissance fair, they would set us up and consider us a music venue for the fair. So they would put stages in various parts of the fair, have them spread around, and where our booth went, they considered that another stage. We'd be sitting at the fair at night with nothing else to do, because we would camp out in our booth over the weekend while we were doing our sales in the daytime. The crowd would go home, and then at night the Renaissance Fair became a genuine Renaissance village. And usually there was no electricity or anything because of the fire danger, and just little camp lights. And you could walk around from booth to booth, and there's all kinds of ethnic music being played. People, because you're not watching TV, you're not listening to the radio, you're doing it like the good old days.
Well, after hours, it was party, party, party. Everybody partied. That's pretty much what it was, and it went on late into the night. It was one big party. In 1989, things kind of slowed down, and there was a couple of companies that were interested in buying it, so we sold it, and it was sold to Folk Craft Instruments and in Winstead, Connecticut. David Marks bought it, and since that time it has been sold again. It is now Folk Craft in Woodburn, Indiana, and they still make the Folk Roots dulcimer, and you can buy them there. It's one of the major dulcimers in the industry.
Do you earn any royalties from those?
No royalties.
I worked as a graphic artist for a number of years, and I learned to do it on the Macintosh, and I was self-taught. And I found out that I was pretty good at it, doing artwork on a Mac. And so I went to companies in Silicon Valley looking for freelance art jobs. And I hooked up with Atari, Time Warner. I was painting backgrounds for arcade games. There was one called Primal Rage that I worked on that was a multi-seller. I did always have a feeling that every one of these books, all of this was for a purpose. It was kind of like there was a little voice telling me, Mike, someday you're going to do something with this material. All these books you're gathering, all the stuff that you're collecting is going to have a purpose and a meaning, and the time will come when that is ready to happen. And so I just kind of told myself, well, if that's true, when the time comes, I'll know it. The company I worked for went from 40 down to 4, and I didn't make the cut. And then I met some of the younger people that I had worked with over there. I'd bump into them from time to time or hear from them, and they were all out looking for work too. And I found out that the kind of work that I had been doing, just about every job out there that was that kind of work had at least 4,000 applicants, is what I was being told. And the last thing in the world they were going to hire is somebody 65 years old. You're 65 years old, your insurance costs more, you got to get paid more because you're wiser. You're definitely they're not going to get away with making you work overtime without getting paid. All of which they can do to these youngsters who just want to get a job and get a start. So I realized I'm not going to be able to get it full time. I'm going to have to go back to freelance. So I decided, well, maybe it's time to reinvent myself. First thing I did was drive north and go to every little roadside attraction and gift shop from here to Canada and see what the current status was on those places. When I was younger and I would go traveling, I would always go to those places anyway because of my interest in Bigfoot. And those places up north all have little Bigfoot shops and, chainsaw Bigfoot carvings outside. So I wanted to do homage to the roadside attraction. I wanted it to be a roadside attraction because I want to attract people to come in and get an education that they've missed. that has been sadly lacking in the news media and in the academic halls. I was here, was in the back room. Ralph had left, was going someplace for the evening. The night before, or maybe 2 nights before, I had awakened with heartburn. Seemed like heartburn, burning in my chest. I took a couple of Tums, seemed to relieve it, so I didn't think anything else about it. A couple of nights later, it wasn't even late. I hadn't even gone to bed yet. I'm just in the back there, turning on the TV, going to kick back, and I start feeling that heartburn again. And I took some Tums, and it didn't go away. And it got worse. And it got worse. And then I noticed that I was starting to sweat. And then I came in here and I went into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror, and my face was whiter than my beard. There was absolutely no blood in my head. I had always said to myself, the day will come, I always expected I'd have one. It was a matter of when, and will I survive it? This is how I looked at it. And so now I'm facing it. Here it is. Oh, I think it's happening now. I call my brother, who lives a half a mile down the road. Howie, can you get up here? I need you to give me a ride to the hospital. I think I might be having a heart attack. So he got up here as fast as he could. I jumped in the car. He drove me down to Dominican Hospital. I walked in the door. I went in, filled out a card, sat down. Somebody came over. Well, they asked me what the problem was. I told them. Then this guy comes up and he's got a little gurney thing that goes flat, or says we sit down here. So I sat down on that thing, and that's the last thing I remember. My father died when he was 57. I was 64, 65. I mean, I had already lived past my dad. I felt like I was already on borrowed time to a certain degree, and that it could happen at any moment. And I went, and I just remember saying, I survived it. I wondered if I would. I survived the first one. We don't know how many more are coming, because my dad had several. But I survived the first one, so I can still go on and maybe get this Bigfoot thing done. Putting the museum together was kind of a culmination of 60 years of being an artist, because the museum itself, to me, is a little piece of art that I put together. I made it look like a roadside attraction. I'm told that I did a good job at that. People do stop. I meant it to be an art gallery. I have my art in here on display, and other people's art. I meant it to be a learning center and a library. I have my library available. People can come and use these books that are writing papers or doing research on these topics. And each display is a little bit of a design project. Everything that's on the wall, the little call-outs, all that, the map that I assembled. This is all a piece of art, this whole building, this whole thing. It's also like performance art, because I perform to the people who come in here every day and profess to them and give them information they've never heard anywhere before. And I love it when I see the lights go on in their eyes, and most especially in the children and the young people, when they come in and realize that there's more to it than what they've been told by their professors, who are resting on their tenure and no longer doing their research and no longer have a passion for their subject. Sasquatch have souls, they're not the beasts we thought they were. Sasquatch have souls, they're a lot like you and me. But they don't loot, they don't pollute, and they don't mess with Earth's ecology. Sasquatch souls, they're the kind of people you ought to want to be. Sasquatch souls, they're not like you and me, 'cause they don't pollute. Oh, I forgot. There's another chorus about they don't need stuff. Sticks and stones are quite enough for them to raise a happy family. Sasquatch souls, they're not the beasts we thought they were, no. Sasquatch souls, they're something like you and me.